So Zenshu episode 3 was another banger of an episode, but it has me incredibly concerned and it could be very bad for our MC Natsuko because she, up until the first two episodes, kind of has like the idea. She has like the future sight of where things will go because, for the characters in question, they just think she's a future sight. But for us, and for her, she's watched the movie before. But things are going out of order. Things are happening sooner. And most importantly, it's hard to say for sure, but up to this point, I've never gotten the assumption that she's looked at this elf as like someone who turns bad. And the end of the episode, you might be able to interpret she knows something's up, but she also might just be confused. But prior to the attack, because she says early in the episode that the next time an attack happens is when it rains, and there is a 0% probability for rain. So I'm thinking if something happens, it's because of a magic spell, then it starts to rain early, then it would make sense. But no, there was no rain. It was a completely different situation. And it seems like she was behind, this elf, who was supposed to be an ally. I mean, I understand that apparently the original story was dark. It had a dark ending. There was a lot of dark twists. But it feels like we're building into characters who might have been allies to originally, now because, the big event was supposed to be a funeral, which then brings in return Destiny and Luke kind of having a little romance. Instead, it was a harvest celebration and stopping her from being with her shitty husband-to-be. So there's a lot of concern about where the story's going, and I think one of the big things that has helped her up to this point was the prediction of when things could happen. It's entirely possible by episode 4, 5, maybe even 6, she may have no more future sight predictions because the story in question will be in completely uncharted territories, which could be a completely new timeline, which could bring about a lot of different things. But I guess as long as she continues to have creative ideas, she'll be able to wrestle them out, because, Jesus, what a great episode, and easily her best drawing yet, if I'm being completely honest. Of course, if you want to support my work, though, and see my full thoughts of these episodes, I do have a Patreon where we have those full live reactions, if you're so interested. So, the interesting thing is, all throughout watching this episode up until close to the end, I was thinking to myself, my idea of where the show might go, because we know in her original world, she was in the process of doing her next big hit, a rom-com. A girl who clearly has no experience with love or great connections with humans. Yeah, that was going to be a crashed and burned production. It's like when virgins write romances and they're like, yes, I think this is how relationships and romance goes. It's very clear to tell, different authors who have experience with things versus who don't. So the idea of using this world as a way to understand love, that's why I think, and I'm sure many people based on even last week's video, are under the assumption she does go back home at some point. But the interesting thing is I was thinking that, okay, there's a lot of different things brewing here. She'll, use her ability to predict the future. The more she does it, the more people will be convinced of her abilities. And I was thinking to myself, it'd be a very interesting piece of drama and could really help her write her next project if come a point where she's like, maybe her and Luke are arguing. He's like, no, we got to be careful. And she's like, no, I know what happens. I'm always right. Then it doesn't happen that way. Then they have a bit of a falling out. That could provide for drama and could be a good staple of how to write drama in her upcoming project. And now by episode 3, it feels like we're barely on the, like, she has ideas, but, she's pretty fuzzy on what things are going to happen. The idea that the two, like, priest characters or whatever they were, walking in, that was supposed to happen a lot later in the story's runtime. And we're at essentially the start point. Like, we're probably within the first 20 minutes of the movie, all things considered. And by her, point of view, this is seeming like stuff that happens past the midway point. So if we go the route of this is not only a completely different timeline, and everything is completely different, is the big dramatic bombshell, rather than his pal, the perverted unicorn, dying as a sacrifice, rather it's a betrayal of a close friend and a close ally, because maybe the story is still desperately trying to keep it a dark fantasy, because while we avoided the big, this was supposed to be a funeral for not only the unicorn for sacrificing, but all those who fell dying to protect, their home. Instead, we had a harvest festival celebration. So despite things working out really well, it seems like the story is still desperately trying to ruin Luke. And that's really interesting. And this could be bad for him. I mean, it could be great for us as a viewer, but very bad for these characters. And I'm interested what's going to happen next. Though it was a very fun episode prior to the bigger bombshells. I mean, I love Destiny as a character. I think she's adorable. She honestly reminds me of a mermaid. There's something about her look, her face, her hair. It feels mermaid-like. She's just adorable, though. And apparently in the original story, as we see with our MC, she's like, I always wondered this. Like, why do you marry this guy just who has 8 other wives? Like, why don't you just open up the orphanage yourself? And in this episode, we get to see what she makes. We essentially go up against a giant praying mantis, and we summon a wrestler. The thing was just awesome. It literally was jumping around, grabbing its pincers, smacking her. It was so cool. And the fact that this girl went from almost marrying flamboyant Steve over here, who was going to probably use and abuse like any of the others. Like, I don't think he's like physically abusive like a lot of these shitty people, but she was clearly gonna have a shit life. Went from that to, I'm dressing up as my hero, I want to be around strong people like this, and I'm gonna open up my own orphanage. That is just peak adorable, and I love that type of stuff. This show is just gas. It is awesome. It's definitely in my top 3 new anime of this season. It's just great. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think visually it's one of the best looking shows of the season. I love the art direction, I love the backgrounds, and best of all is when she animates these things. I love how it happens. I have seen a really weird complaint though, and I have a suspicion it's coming from people who have never watched Magical Girl anime or just hate Magical Girl anime, and that is the 20-25 second animation that we've seen every episode of her approaching her desk and getting started. It's the same animation every time, but that's how a Magical Girl transformation is. It's also insanely well animated. I love seeing it. If they were showing it multiple times in an episode, that's an issue. But once an episode, when she approaches and then you actually get a unique animation from her drawing, no, that's awesome to me. I completely disagree with that criticism. It seems like most likely what's going to happen, though, is we're sticking to the 3-day cooldown. So she passes out. It seems like what she's been drawing up to this point has been about the equivalent of a 3-day work cycle. What would be interesting is if she draws something so insane she passes out for a week, and when she comes to, the story's in a much darker place, because we are in a completely new territory that she doesn't know exactly where it's going to go. And unfortunately, despite her and Luke's cute connection, honestly, it's a cute love triangle as it stands. It could get bad if shit does really hit the fan, but I guess time will tell. You let me know what you thought down below. I definitely think this episode went in unexpected directions. The plot thickens, and honestly, it's just getting better the more I'm watching. But of course, let me know what you're feeling down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell. Like I mentioned, we do have those full live reactions if you're so interested over on my Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. So today we got Mobita, Feather, The Lyrical G, Andrew Stevens, Himi Meow Toga, and we also have Misto Dreamer. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care. Y'all have a good one.